Hello, AONG. This is Mr. Carlson, and we're going to be talking about quadrilaterals day 2. Our target is to apply properties of rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. We're still going to be working out of the target A, practice problems. And the practice problems we'd like you to do would be number 12 and 14 through 21. So make sure you're doing those practice problems to check to see if you understand the lesson. All right, so we're going to talk about the properties of rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. Oh my. So let's jump right into it. Hopefully you printed out the posted polygons properties flowchart. It should be in your packet, and you can always print out another copy if you need to. This is a great way to stay organized with sort of the way that all these quadrilaterals are related. So yesterday, the first lesson we talked about, the first quadrilateral we talked about was parallelograms. And we've got those properties down there. But we're going to back up to the top here and talk about the two main properties of quadrilaterals. Okay. So everything that's on this flowchart is a quadrilateral. And what all quadrilaterals have in common are two main things. First thing is that all quadrilaterals have 4 sides. And the second is that the interior angles of any quadrilateral add up to be 360 degrees. Let's talk about where that comes from for 1 second. So if you've got a 4-sided polygon, we can always divide any 4-sided polygon into 2 triangles by connecting opposite vertices. And you guys have learned that the sum of the interior angles in any triangle is always 180 degrees. Well, if we have 2 triangles, then we've got 180 plus 180. So that's where the 360 degrees is coming from. All right, so we're going to go on down our flow chart. We're going to come back to kites and trapezoids in the future. Make sure you've got those properties written down from yesterday's lesson on your flow chart. You can pause the video here if you want to write them down. I'm just going to keep going and talk about the properties of rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. All right, so let's talk about rectangles first. So the first property of a rectangle is that all 4 angles are congruent. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in a rectangle. And if all 4 angles are congruent, so if we give them all the same marking, if all 4 are congruent and they all add up to be 360, if we called each angle measure x, then we'd say x plus x plus x plus x, or 4x equals 360 degrees. So each interior angle is 90 degrees. Okay. So all 4 angles are congruent in a rectangle, which means they are all right angles. Okay. The second property is that the diagonals are congruent. So if we were to draw in the 2 diagonals, the length of both those diagonals are the same. So let's label this rectangle A, B, C, D. So the length of AB, or segment AB, is congruent to, segment AC is congruent to segment BD. Okay. All right, so there's our rectangle. Let's talk about the rhombus. So first property is all four sides are congruent. So let's draw a rhombus. And one thing to keep in mind here is we've got these arrows on this flow chart. Everything on this page is a quadrilateral. If we go down this middle column, we've got parallelograms, which means the quadrilaterals below parallelograms also have all the properties of the parallelograms plus some more specific properties. Okay, so rectangles, rhombuses, and squares also have all the properties of the parallelograms and then some more specific additional properties. All right, so a rhombus is a parallelogram that has all four sides congruent. The next property is the diagonals are perpendicular. So if we were to draw in the diagonals, are perpendicular, which is another way of saying they intersect at a right angle. Okay, so really we've got four right triangles created by those two diagonals of the rhombus. The last property is the diagonals bisect the opposite angles. So what that means is the opposite angles in any parallelogram are congruent, but the diagonals of a rhombus split those angles into two congruent angles. Okay. All right. And the last parallelogram or quadrilateral we're going to talk about today is the square. And what I have written down here is all properties. So squares have all the properties of a rectangle. They have all the properties of a rhombus. And they have all the properties of a parallelogram. And they have all the properties of quadrilaterals. So a square is the most specific quadrilateral in terms of properties that exists. Okay, so make sure you're practicing your understanding of the properties by doing the homework questions. And thanks again for your hard work, and look forward to seeing you guys virtually in the near future.